Thanks for joining us today. This webinar is called Presenting Results, and we are presenting by staff from the Evaluation Center at the University of Colorado, Denver. And this work is supported by the State Tobacco Education and Prevention Program STEP at the Colorado Department of Health and Environment. We have two presenters today. I'm Erica Clark, and I'm an evaluation specialist at the Evaluation Center.
Good morning, and I'm Bridget Nectarline here at the Evaluation Center as well. Thanks for joining us.
Just a quick orientation to Zoom, our webinar software. On the bottom menu on the far left, you'll see a couple of icons for your microphone and video. They should have red lines through them. Please leave these muted during the webinar. To the right of the menu, click and you'll see an icon for chat. Please feel free to ask questions or make comments throughout the webinar. We'll try to address them at least at the very end when we have some time. Let's try the chat out now. To get a better sense of who's participating in today's webinar, please type your name and the organization in the chat box. And if you have a few people in the room with you, please type each of their names.
Good morning, Scott and Mary.
Great. Great.
So this is our third series of webinars. The first series covered surveys, which included survey development, management, analysis, and reporting. The second covered qualitative data, including qualitative data collection, analysis, and reporting. Last week, we presented on preparing for data dissemination. Today, we're going to talk about how to create your report product using the best practices for data visualization. If you were unable to attend the first two series and last week's webinar, they are archived on our website, which is provided at the end of the webinar. So first, let's do a quick review of what we learned last week. We presented on preparing data for dissemination and reviewed two main dissemination methods: infographics and how to use data placemats to facilitate a data interpretation session. We talked a lot about who your audience may be and what is the appropriate key message for each audience. So now that we've decided on our audience, our key message, and our dissemination method, we want to be sure the data we visualize is effective. We want to ensure our intended audience understands the key message. While we do approach this process from an evaluator's perspective, we are sharing information we have learned from a wide variety of fields. This includes evaluation, public health, education, and business. We hope that our examples are broad enough that you are able to explore how some of these strategies can be used within your field. What we're going to share today may be new to some or serve as a reminder for others, but what we really tried to do and think about was how to adapt traditional charts that you commonly see, like bar charts, line graphs, things like that, and we tried to show new and different things you can do to enhance those charts. Specifically, today's webinar will present information to enhance your ability to explain what data visualization is and why it's important, describe 10 best practices in data visualization, choose appropriate charts, prepare effective charts, and be able to develop a data dissemination product, putting all the steps from webinar 1 and today's webinar together. So let's take a step away from data for a moment. When you look at this picture, think about how your eye moves across the page. What draws you in? Let me take away our chapter title. For me, my eye initially follows the pathway and then sweeps across the mountain range and then down to the reflection in the lake. As you think about data visualization, it's important to think about how to draw people into the story that you're trying to tell. I've gone to many presentations and seminars about data visualization, and it's something that I really think about every day. I take the light rail to work, so it really provides me the opportunity just to look out the window and observe the things around me as I'm coming into work each morning. I like to look at how people use color, patterns, shapes, and sizes in their designs. So this is a new apartment building that has been built right along one of the light rail stops. I pass it every day, and the design and the use of color draws me in every day. I see this, I look at it, and my eye is always drawn to this every day I pass it. I like the color combination and the splashes of the bright yellow and the geometric design, and the yellow block on the balconies. The use of the bright yellow draws your eye from the top left of the building to the bottom right of the building. Later, I'll talk about how to use color intentionally, but I just wanted to share an example of how you may begin to notice some of the best practices in your everyday life. Okay, let's get back to what data visualization is. It is really any effort to visually display data to improve understanding. Data visualization is the graphical display of abstract information for two purposes: sense-making and communication. That's a quote from Stephen Few, and he's one of the many pioneers in data visualization. So why is this even important? Strong and effective data visualization can quickly summarize a lot of information in a way that is easy to understand. People process information and remember it better when it's presented visually. Don't feel like I'm telling you anything new here, but because I can't go on social media today without seeing memes. A meme is a picture with words. In today's world, everything is visual. We have a social media app that's just dedicated to pictures. 63% of images combined with text is recalled 3 days later, while only 10% of text is recalled 3 days later. There's a huge body of research that looks into how we process information and what we're able to understand. Many people have started to translate this research and apply it to how we visualize our findings and data. To name a few of the pioneers, we have Edward Tufte, who is really known for talking about chart junk, and he really stresses the integrity of data visualization. It's not that we're just trying to make something beautiful, we're also trying to make sure people understand the truth of what the data is saying. Stephen Few, Hans Rosling, David McCandless, Stephanie Evergreen, who we reference a lot during this webinar, and Anne Emery, who has some really great tutorials. With the influence of these major names, we're going to talk about some of the best practices to keep in mind as you begin to develop your final product. Before we go into these items, let's review our sample story so we can refer to the example product.
For the purpose of this webinar, to be able to look at sample dissemination products, we made up a story for us to use as an example. The nonprofit we created is called the Animal Rescue Fund, ARF. The Animal Rescue Fund is a nonprofit whose mission is for every dog to have a woof over its head. The organization recently received funding to improve its website by creating volunteer profiles so that potential new volunteers could read about the current volunteers' experiences. ARF also added an online training module for orienting new volunteers. They conducted an evaluation to understand the effectiveness and impact of website improvements. In addition to survey and interview data, evaluators also used some secondary data to be able to share some formative and summative evaluation results. These formative results provide feedback for improvement, while the summative results inform the overall impact or improvement. Before we go into detail about what the key messages, let me move forward here and tell you about what our key messages and our dissemination plan was. ARC's Board of Directors is one of our audiences, and we want to highlight the website's importance and share data that supports the decision for the board to continue providing the funding. To do this, we may consider sharing the largely positive feedback we've received concerning the updated website and how this has been associated with an increase in the number of volunteers and an increase in hours of service that they provide. Our second audience is ARC's program leadership and staff. Our key purpose is to choose effective data to interpret together with the staff that would help inform an action plan. For this audience, we've planned to study the data together to be sure we accurately understand the context in which the data were collected in.
So thinking back to the importance of data visualization, we'll review 10 best practices in data visualization. Sometimes poorly done visualizations can do more harm than good. In this webinar series, we have tried to use all the best practices we are advocating, but we know we're not perfect. There are likely many ways our presentation could be improved. Things to keep in mind as you formulate your key messages and develop your report product. In our case, we developed an infograph and a set of data placemats. Each had different audiences. We tried our best to apply these best practices to each product. To illustrate the principles, let's start by looking at an ineffective PowerPoint slide. What problems do you see in this slide? So if you can go ahead and use your comment box on, I think that's the bottom right of your bar there, and type in some of the things that you see wrong so we can go back to look at this slide. And so if you could just type in a couple things that stand out to you about this slide. So it could be anything. I mean, we haven't received any comments yet, but you know, as you look at this, are you thinking, is it clear? Do you understand exactly what they're saying? Can you read it? So some of the problems here is, you know, we have a lot of different types of data. The text is kind of small. You don't know exactly what to look at. And it's not really making it easy for you to completely understand the key message here. And honestly, it's just kind of boring. So this kind of brings us to our first best practice, which is focus on one message. One idea per PowerPoint slide, one main idea per paragraph, and it's all building toward your central message or theme.
Best practice number 2 is to group data intentionally. Rather than done in our poor example, it would be better to develop a series of slides related to volunteers, or creating separate sections or chapters for results related to donations and staff employment, rather than having all these different data points and messages mixed up together in bullet points. Let me show you what I mean. For example, here is one of the report products, a data placemat that we prepared for the ARF evaluation. All of the information presented here is about the volunteers, our first grouping. The column on the left shows 2 line graphs of the number of volunteers per month. On the right side, we've grouped key data representing the volunteer perspective, several quotes from the current volunteers, as well as some summary data points from the volunteer survey that we did. next to those green arrows. The third best practice is to use color intentionally. It's effective to create a color palette of 3 or 4 main colors that are used throughout your report or presentation. It really helps keep your reader engaged and makes your report product look well put together and polished. You might have noticed that we're using the colors from CDPHE's logo in this webinar. Here's an example to illustrate best practice number 3, using color intentionally, in a bar chart. In this case, the data point, the column on the right representing survey responses for the ARF website, is the only one in blue. It draws your eye to this column. This is the key message that we want to highlight, which we also put into the title. Volunteers heard about ARF through the ARF website. If you find a color scheme that you like online and want to bring those colors into your own report product, you can use this handy website to identify the red, blue, and green color codes. I'll navigate over to a very brief video we prepared to demonstrate how to use this handy resource, the image color picker.
Okay, so real quick, the link we just showed you for imagecolorpicker.com, that's where we're at right now. So this is that home page that you'll see. And here you can upload an image. So if you have a logo that you're trying to match, you can do that. If you don't have a logo, or you know the website, whatever colors you're trying to mimic, this is where you can copy and paste the website. So we've been using the Department of Health, so the CDPHE color scheme, to make sure we're matching these colors. We copy the website, we come down here and we paste it, and then we take an image. We'll take an image of the top portion of the website, and that's typically where a lot of websites will have the logo. We'll just take a minute to upload. So now it's uploaded. And here, so we want this blue. So anywhere you click on the screen, anywhere, I mean, I'm choosing the blue, it will change the color over here. So our RGB code will be here. So all of the Microsoft products ask for an RGB code. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel, this is where you can plug in that RGB code. And the HTML code is something that we use when we're changing the color of something online. So Noun Project is our online library of icons, and we use the HTML code for that. So this gives you both, which is really nice. And then we use this green. So I'm going to click on the green, and you see this box changes colors over here with the new RGB code. We also use the dark gray as well. So this has been a really quick and easy way to figure out exactly how to match the colors in your products, in your presentations. Yeah, hopefully you find this helpful. There's lots of different websites out there that can help. There's things that you can just download directly for your computer, but this is the one that we use all the time. So thank you.
Great, and a couple of things. One of my colleagues actually told me that if you're a Mac user, it automatically happens on a Mac. I guess you just hover over the color that you like, and it spits out those codes for you. And then the HTML code is also referred to as a hex code, just so you know.
Great. Let's look back at our poor example again. One of the many issues with this slide is the heavy use of text. As many of you noticed, there's just too much text. It's way too small to read. And this leads us to our next 2 best practices. Use text effectively. This includes considerations for your font choice, using the appropriate text size, and using hierarchical headings. You want to be sure that you use a consistent font or fonts throughout your report product, and pay particular attention to the typeface of the fonts that you select for your report. Take a second to look at this icon. I bet your eye is drawn to the one shape that's different from the others. Unless I'm trying to tell a story about the triangle, I don't want to draw attention to it. If you're inconsistent with your text, you may draw the attention away from what your key message is. You're probably very familiar, but I'll just give a brief review. There are two major font categories, serif and sans serif. Serif is a Latin word meaning little feet. You can see the font types of Baskerville, Georgia, and Times New Roman all have the details on the edges of each letter. In contrast, sans serif fonts are cleaner without the feet, and they have really a much more modern feel. There are mixed opinions about which font is most appropriate for when. Some say that serif fonts are best for small written text, like in a traditional narrative report. But Stephanie Evergreen, one of our evaluation and data visualization experts, suggests that the sans serif fonts should be used for headings and call-out boxes to draw attention to those. It's important to choose the appropriate font size of your report, of course. Some general rules of thumb are, for PowerPoint presentations, use no smaller than 16 points. It's going to be projected up. You want to make sure people in the back of the room of your presentation are going to be able to read it. For printed material, use no smaller than 11. Lastly, we recommend to use hierarchical headings, particularly in your narrative, print, report, or other documents. When you use headings in your narrative report, as you go deeper into the report, the headings levels get smaller. Using these different sections really helps your reader and most certainly keeps your report organized. We've come to our fifth best practice, be smart with space. Make sure that you use the space in your report products carefully. The table on the left is incredibly cluttered and disorganized. There's not room for it to hold one more plate. We want to keep the reader engaged by organizing the space and helping them to sort and prioritize the information into smaller chunks, like the table on the right. Using white space liberally in your report products will help the reader to take a break from all of that complex information.
So best practice number 6 is minimize text and use images to enhance the meaning. So the prime directive noted by many writing style guides is omit needless words. This applies to all reporting formats, including longer evaluation reports or even PowerPoint slides. Here's an example of a slide with too many words. It is sometimes helpful to start with all the relevant words and then begin to eliminate all the words that are not central to your message, as we've done here. Our main message was that our volunteers had a range of motivations. So we reduced the text in each of the quotes. Text we want to eliminate is shown shaded out here. Here's the revised slide with less text. Then we added images to further enhance the message. These are free photos you can download with no worry that you're violating copyright. The website is called pixabay.com. We'll have a link to this resource on the STEP eval website. Icons are also effective to enhance meaning quickly. Number 7, guide the reader. You can focus the attention of the reader using photos or icons. You can use marker slides or icons to indicate new sections of a PowerPoint or a report. For example, let's look at one of our slides again. In this webinar series, we are using the blue triangle to indicate major sections. Notice how we've used the photo. If you follow the dog's eyes, it directs the reader where to look. The use of color to show significance also leads us to best practice number 8. It is important to consider cultural implications of colors, symbols, and icons. For example, this chart uses red and blue, colors which have strong political meaning to some. Use of other colors may be less distracting from your message. I was at a seminar earlier this summer, and someone provided a great example of this concept. We were reviewing an infographic about the level of experience teachers had today compared to 20 years ago. The infographic used apple icons to represent teachers. Often in the United States, we associate apples with teachers. However, some of the international attendees expressed confusion on why apples were even used as an icon. They didn't make that connection. Number 9, check for understanding. I don't know if I can stress how important this step is. As you are in the process of developing your story through data visuals, ask someone to look at it and see what they understand from what you've created. It can be a colleague or your client. Sometimes I just ask my husband to see if he understands what I'm trying to portray. I recommend checking for understanding throughout your creative and developmental stages. It's not the last step you do or it's many steps throughout the way. Always be sure other people beside you understand what the key message and takeaways are. Number 10, use charts and graphs effectively. This last practice really stresses the importance of choosing the chart or graph that effectively communicates your key message. What I mean by effectively communicate is that your graph or chart clearly shows the key finding without putting the burden on the audience. We don't want the audience to do the heavy lifting. We as the evaluators or the analysts want to do the heavy lifting and make the chart simple and clear. I have seen some pretty complex charts and graphs. While I can decipher what the graph or chart might be saying, at times it can take a lot of mental energy. We want to take away from our graph anything that doesn't help show the main finding.
Great. So after reviewing these best practices, we'd like you to review our infographic that we developed and use the chat box to tell us what best practices are demonstrated here. Hopefully you have it handy. It was attached to the email that I sent yesterday with the webinar link. I'll bring up the infographic on the screen. So please take a minute to look at it and type in the chat box any best practices that we talked about that you notice here. Great. Somebody mentioned the use of images, colors, and fonts. Anything else anybody sees here? Yep, the different graphs. Yeah, we have 2 different graphs and some qualitative data here. A variety of things. And the central photo draws attention to the 4 outer sections to review. So the space is organized in these quadrants. That's great. Yep, and we've combined different data sources, qualitative data, and then also the charts that share the quantitative data from the survey. Great.
Wonderful. It's always so interesting to see what other, I didn't see a flat, someone had mentioned it kind of draws you in like a flower, and I see that now, but it's so interesting to kind of hear what other people see when they look at this. Thank you.
Great. So, down to your choosing the right chart. Data Viz guru Stephanie Evergreen recommends that you first need to identify your story, your key message. We talked about this a lot in the last webinar, and it's our #1 best practice for creating strong and effective data visualization. Then, once you have these messages identified, you can choose the best chart to visualize and present the message. There are many handy chart choosers out there. Stephanie's second book, called Effective Data Visualization, presents all different sorts of different charts and graphs, but the book is organized by the main stories or messages that we need to tell. For example, for ours, we wanted to emphasize the patterns in retaining volunteers. So we used a multiple line graph to show how the patterns in the number of retained volunteers have changed over time. For the year before the improved website and volunteer training occurred in 2016, and then the year after that it occurred in 2017. In addition, we noticed that the website was clearly the primary place that individuals heard about our volunteer program. So we used a simple bar chart and used color to highlight that the website had the most survey responses. Setting chart choosers like Stephanie's in her book is helpful since it highlights that there are many right charts that can help you tell your story. And it's fun to experiment to see which one and you and your audience will like the best. And also, using a variety of charts in a report can keep your reader really interested. So another little bit of audience participation. Please take just a minute to type in the chat box again and tell us what charts and graphs do you use to display your data. Great. Line graph, bar graph, double bar, pie. Okay. Any other ones? Yeah, tables with clear and concise information along with bar graphs, pie charts. Great. Thanks. So in this next section, we'll go through several different chart types. I'm sure that most are very familiar to you. We've got line graphs, we've got bar graphs we're going to share. But we've tried to present them with some added innovation and demonstrate the best practices that we've talked about in this webinar. So as we go through the different charts, take note of which one you would like to learn how to make on your own, or if there's a feature of a chart that you want to learn how we did. And the one we'll ask you for your feedback at the end, and the one with the most votes, we'll create a tutorial, if that's helpful to you all, and we can post it to our website next week. So keep that in mind as we go through these. So this first one is just a simple, basic bar chart. We've used color here to highlight and a strong title and subtitle. Bar charts are typically used to compare categorical data or frequencies of responses to a survey item. But this bar chart is innovative here since we've added a benchmark line, that green horizontal line, and it ties to our key message in the chart title and subtitle. The green benchmark line visually shows how ARF has performed in reaching the total monthly volunteer hours needed for the organization to operate smoothly.
And so as we go through each of these charts, in that top right corner, you see kind of the low effort. We kind of try and gauge how quickly you can make some of these charts. You'll see they get a little bit more challenging as we continue to go, but you can just keep an eye on that effort gauge on the upper right-hand side as we go through these.
Great. So this one is called a diverging bar chart. It's very similar to a regular stacked bar chart, which is used to compare categorical data or frequencies, like here. It's diverging because the frequencies all diverge from the same point. This is done through aligning the frequencies of responses at the agree category. You'll see it's that lighter blue. We did this in order to drive your attention to the frequencies of responses that are above neutral, these agree and strongly agreed categories. This is consistent with the chart's title. Over half of the volunteer respondents agreed or strongly agreed with the following statement. I'll pause just for a minute so you can study this one a little more. We gauge this one as having moderate effort since we had to fill in some dummy data there in order to align how we wanted it here in our Excel spreadsheet. So this next one is a really simple line graph. It represents the number of adoptions at ARF per month over the year. This line graph is very appropriate because we're comparing the same data point at different time points, here, monthly data that we have. The innovation here is that we've added a green bar to show visually the months that our interventions, the website and trainings, were put into place. That was in August. It draws the reader to look at the trend in the number of adoptions before and after that date. We gauge this one as having a low effort, since it is a simple line graph that Excel can help you make really easily. And we just added some, again, fake data in there to make that green bar appear. This next one, again, pretty basic. It's a multiple line graph. It's used to compare how different groups have changed over time. This graph is displaying the number of volunteers per year over the same month. Blue is the 2017 data, and the green line represents the 2016 data. This chart is really low effort. It's really very easy to make in PowerPoint. But what I wanted to emphasize here is that it's effective because you only have 2 lines. The worry about multiple line graphs is that it gets really complicated and difficult to read. Some say it looks like spaghetti when you've got a line graph with many, many different colored lines crisscrossing. So I would recommend that you keep line graphs simple with only 2 or 3 lines represented here. Notice how we use some color here as our legend. So the title connects that the blue line is 2017, since that's in blue, and the green line is 2016. So we've been able to here to eliminate some of that chart junk that we'll see in a little bit by removing our legend and embedding it in the title. Great. This one is a slope graph. It might be a little bit new or different. The slope graph is a version of the line graph that shows the changes in time, but only between 2 time points. It's helpful here to show the differences between 2016 and 2017, and where there are increases or decreases between the 2 points. You can easily compare these different lines here. This example shows the number of new volunteers from 2016 to 2017 by month, and we're comparing the number of new volunteers for a given month. So each line is a different month, showing the difference of how it was in 2016 and 2017. We're really looking to draw your reader to examine the different slopes here. And again, we use color to tie into our message and to highlight the lines that we wanted to. This is moderate effort. Again, we're making all of these in Excel, but we need to manipulate it a little bit more to get it clean and easy to read.
So next is the dumbbell dot plot. And this can show how two numbers are alike or not, or change over time. In this case, it's comparing a pre-test to a post-test. I like the dumbbell dot plot. I think it's a new and interesting way to display data. In our resources page on the website, we provide a link to Stephanie Evergreen's blog post that goes through step-by-step how to create this type of graph in Excel. So this is a great effort, and the reason why it's great effort is because it really does take a lot of time. Definitely the first time you're going to have to play around with it, but all of the questions over on the left-hand side, those are text boxes. That's not automatically put in for Excel, and so it's more time consuming, but it's a nice different way to compare scores, to compare groups. And in our next dumbbell chart, this is an example of comparing the number of volunteers from 2016 to 2017. So this is kind of taking that slope chart that Erica had showed earlier, and it's just, this is a different way you could do that data. And sometimes, as you're thinking about what chart to pick, what other charts are you using can influence that decision. If you have 3 or 4 line graphs, a slope graph might just look too similar to a line graph to where you would maybe choose a dumbbell dot plot instead of a slope graph. Yeah.
And these ones we did rate as having a greater effort. These are a little bit trickier to make in Microsoft Excel. And we're going to list, oh, you did. Sorry about that. Okay, great. The next one is the heat map. The purpose is to show data distributed by a geographic area. On the following slides, we'll illustrate how we made this with a free software program online called myheatmap.com. It's free for up to 20 different data points that you upload online. But if you do have a larger data set, it's no longer free and you have to pay something. But there are many resources online, and we just wanted to illustrate this as another chart type option for the kind of data you might be collecting. So this is one we came up with for using the ARF data. And we used some administrative data to complement the survey and interviews we conducted. Using volunteer addresses, we could examine where our volunteers were traveling from to get to ARF. So the brighter colors represent a greater concentration of volunteers at that location. So I believe that's the bright yellow in this one. So this is in 2016, before the website improvements. So you can see here that most volunteers came from the central Denver area. So we also plotted the data from 2017 to show the change in where the volunteers are traveling to. So this tells us that our volunteer reach has expanded after the enhancements to the website related to recruiting and sustaining volunteers. So we're showing here that volunteers are willing to travel more to get to ARC, and that we've recruited more from a variety of places.
Great. So now we created a quick tutorial of how to remove chart junk. So Excel does a great job of just populating these default charts, and this next video is about 6 minutes long, goes through the steps you can take to really make that chart specific to your program, make it stand out more for what you're trying to say rather than it looking like any other Excel chart.
I'm going to create a bar chart using Excel. I will use some of the best practice principles between the default settings in Excel to meet our best practices that we just reviewed. So here I have my data. I have my answer column and the number column connected to each answer. And I have already filtered them to go from lowest to highest to ensure that our graph shows the lowest on the left-hand side and the highest number on the right-hand side. So from here, I'm going to highlight my data, and I'm going to insert a bar chart. And there's all different types of bar charts that Excel offers, but really we're just looking for the most simple one, and that's the first one here. And then I'm going to add in chart elements. And it'll be a data label on the outside end. Now that I have a number connected to each category, I no longer need the first accent over here. It's not really providing any new information. So I'm going to highlight that and just delete it. Same idea with these grid lines. They're just there. They're not helping us interpret the data easier. It's really just adding to chart junk. So I'm going to highlight those and delete those as well. Next, I'm going to delete my chart title. We still want a chart title, but we want to add it in a text box, so we have a little bit more freedom of how we make that text look. So I'm going to, while I'm clicked on the graph, I'm going to come back to this tab up top and click Insert and click Text Box. Here I'm going to add in the title. We want our title not to be something general, but we want our title to be intentional and describe the main finding of the chart. So for example, I will write, volunteers reported that they heard about the program through the ARC website. There's my tab. I'm going to bring this text box up a little bit. Next, I want to take away the outline and fill of the graph. So I'm going to click back out on the graph, right-click, go to Outline and click No Outline, go to Fill and click No Fill. And now you can see that spreadsheet has come through because our graph is no longer filled in with any color, not even white. Now we need to think about how we can use color to get our key findings across. If we're trying to highlight where volunteers heard about ARC, then we will want to use color to help highlight this. So first I want to gray out everything else that's not really the main finding. So I'm going to click on the bars, right click, come to fill, and choose a light gray. And that changed all of the colors. And now we want our website to stand out. So I'm going to click that, right click again, and fill it. And to be sure that it's the identical blue as other things within our product, I'm going to go into more fill colors. I actually use the color code finder we looked at earlier in the presentation to get the RGB code. To enter in this code, you click the bar like we did, and then we go to more fill colors, and it will bring up the screen. And we have the RGB code, the red, green, and blue numbers. So in this case, R is equal to 6, green is 173, and blue is 228. So this is the exact color that is in the other products and other things that we have to match our colors. So now it changes that to blue. We want to connect this finding to the text in the title with our website. So we're going to highlight that text. And I'm going to select the recent colors. It's actually, Excel will save the recent colors that you add in there. So I'm going to put that in blue and make it bold. Next, I want to make sure that our data point isn't actually coming up into the title. So I'm going to shrink down my graph just a little bit. I'm not losing the proportion or anything. You can still see that the ARC website has the highest number of people, but it's no longer going up into the same level as the title. Next, we're going to change the style of our text. Stephanie Evergreen using Corbel as the text for our chart. You can decide what you like best. There's a lot of differing opinions about what types of text to use, but you know, I really do refer to Stephanie Evergreen a lot. So a lot of her suggestions are research-based, and I really do think that they look very nice and professional. So I'm going to find Corbel. And then I'm going to do the same thing for all of the text in here. Here at the bottom as well. So now we have a graph that's ready to be copied and pasted into a report, an infographic, a placemat, or presentation. And it is really using all of those principles. You know, we got rid of the chart jumps. We're using color intentionally, and we've put a finding in our title.
And one thing that the video, I didn't mention in the video, is that you should also change the text size. I think the default size for Excel charts is 9 or sometimes even smaller, but I would change that to 11 or bigger, depending on, you know, what product it's going on. And then next, check yourself before you wreck yourself. So Stephanie Evergreen and Ann Emery have a great data visualization checklist. So after you explore different types of charts and ways to display your data, it's always good to check the quality of your work. This checklist provides great information on what you need to keep in mind to be sure your charts are easily understood. A lot of them are some of our best practices and then some. So, and they even has a checkbox for what level you're meeting each best practice. So that we will provide that as well on our resource page for you. Great. So we've reviewed the different chart types and the tutorial of how to make a clean, basic, default-free bar chart. So in the comment box, we're really curious if any of these charts we've looked at today really pique your interest, and if there's anything that you would like to learn, we would be happy to prepare some sort of brief tutorial on how to make that. So please type in the chat box now if there's something you would like to learn more about. Great. So somebody mentioned the dumbbell chart. Any other? And for the dumbbell charts, we do share a link on our resource page that will take you to the blog that has the step-by-step guide on how to do that. It's a lot of steps, but that's how I learned how to do it. So it's very effective in their teaching method. Then we have some heat maps. Okay. So in response to some of the feedback we received from last week's webinar, someone had mentioned that they weren't sure how to kind of create an infographic or use some of the Word software to do that. So we, to respond to that, we created a video on how to create the infographic in PowerPoint. So the infographic that we shared, we have a video now where it goes through step-by-step how to create exactly what you see here. We don't go into each individual graph type and how to do that, but really just generally how to use PowerPoint to create it. And so we'll post that next week. And then it looks like heat maps might be the only interest. I mean, we can create a tutorial of any of the charts.
And we can at least explore a little more the free resource that we found to make that heat map. And maybe we could compile some other websites too where there's more free options related to that. How does that sound? Great. 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 So these are two of our key evaluator data visualization pros that we really reference a lot, and we drew from both of them for a lot of the content of this webinar. And if you're really interested in this, I really, really strongly encourage you to at least go to their websites and read their blog. Stephanie and Ann both have many tutorials, many samples, handouts on all of these topics that you can access for free on your own. But if you are really interested, it also, Stephanie has two textbooks that we've mentioned before too that are really worthwhile to take you to look at. And we should mention, you know, we're really making a plug for Stephanie Evergreen here, but we don't get any kickback, of course, from promoting her book, but we really just think she's a real leader in it and is great at teaching it too. Great. So, similar to the past webinar, we'll post resources, including the slides from this presentation, to our website, www.stepeval.org. And I'll also create a handout with all of the different resources we've mentioned today that we didn't necessarily have on a slide, but I'll make a handout of that. And on our website, you also find the previously archived webinars on surveys and qualitative methods. And after this webinar, I'll send out a very, very brief feedback survey, and we'd love to hear what you think about the webinar today. And we are really running up on our time limit here. I think we have about a minute or two for questions. If there's anything we can address right now, or again, feel free to email me.
Yeah. Or if you have additional questions that you think of later, go ahead and write them in that feedback survey that we send.
Oh, yep. Looks like no questions. Again, feel free to reach out and we can help you further.
Or email us, really anything. If you're trying one of these graphs and you're having problems, please feel free to email us and we can help troubleshoot anything that you're running into. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. Thanks.
End meeting. So go back. Yep, see that? End meeting.